Welcome back to Yang Daily. I'll be your host, Alex Cheney, bringing you all the Yang news you need to live your life right. Sorry for getting this out late. More to come later today. We have a lot of big news items to cover, one really good one, and a lot more not really good ones. Let's get to them. First off, we're trending hashtag direct cash relief today, so toss that on to any social mediatizing that you do. And now we have to talk Trump, which I hate to do, but his recent tweet concerns our cause. Quote, well-run states should not be bailing out poorly run states using coronavirus as the excuse. The elimination of sanctuary cities, payroll taxes, and perhaps capital gains taxes must be put on the table. Also, lawsuit indemnification and business deductions for restaurants and int. End quote. I'm not sure what E&T is, but it seems that Trump has abandoned any pretense of giving a crap about the American people, unless those people are rich. I mean, cutting capital gains taxes? Really? Now? That almost exclusively benefits the wealthy. Payroll tax cuts are biased towards high earners. And of course, both will defund Social Security and Medicaid. Lawsuit indemnification protects corporations from any accountability to their workers, and then the sanctuary cities and not wanting to bail out the states that have been hard hit so far, which are blue states on the coast, is just pure politics. Trump also seems not to know that Democratic states are net payers to the federal government, while Republican states are net receivers of tax dollars collectively, so his comments on bailing out the poorly run states would actually apply to Republican states. I can't really imagine how he could have crammed any more backward thinking into this tweet if he had tried, honestly. At a time when we need a leader to unite the country and help the everyday American, Trump is choosing to do the exact opposite on both counts. I really think we should have been targeting a messaging campaign at Trump sooner, because whoever he's talking to, they are pointing him directly away from giving a damn about us. The longer we let this go on, the harder it will be to bring him around to UBI. One way to get that going would be to sign the new official petition to the White House. If it gets 100,000 signatures, the White House is obligated to respond to it. I think we should hear what they have to say to the people. Another way is to send this week's newest template letter to Congress from Income Movement. Grab both from the links, sign, and spread them around, gang. In more bad news, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has reportedly been hospitalized with coronavirus. Yang has often commented that we should put term limits on justices so that we don't have to worry every time they catch a cold. Well, it's time to worry. At her age, the odds are not great. And Mitch and Donald would be all too delighted to see that seat emptied so they can stack the courts even more to one side with underqualified flunkies that will be stuck with for generations. All right, on to the good news. A federal judge in New York has officially ordered the state to reinstate the June 23rd primary, siding with Yang in his lawsuit against the board. That's right, Andrew won us our right to vote back. Chew on that. In response, the gang immediately got hashtag Yang Saves Democracy trending on Twitter. What's even better is that the comments section on the tweets about this were replete with tons of burners and others outside the gang thanking Andrew for protecting down-ballot candidates and getting Bernie back on the ballot, and those with previous grudges against him, for whatever reasons, forgiving him. Though it wasn't his intention, I think Yang has won back a lot of street cred that he lost with burners over the endorsement. They now see that, though they may not always see eye to eye on everything, Yang does fight for what's right, even when Bernie won't. Here's just a few comments I saw from the non-Yang gang, which are representative of a much larger sample. Amazing. Kudos to Andrew Yang for caring about democracy in these trying times. Yang came through in the clutch. We'll remember who stood up against this and who did nothing. Thank you, Andrew Yang. A redeeming moment, Andrew Yang. Yang, I see you. Thank you, Yang, you will be remembered. End quotes. I am really glad to see this. It's going to be vital that Yang Gang and Burners unite, both right now and in 2024, if we want to accomplish our shared progressive goals. And back to bad news. Governor Cuomo has already said that the state could move to appeal the decision. Sounds to me like Chris Cuomo needs to go talk some sense into big bro Andrew Cuomo before he steps into the ring for an Andrew on Andrew battle royale and finds out, if you know what I'm saying. Moving on, Humanity Forward has officially endorsed both Heidi Briones and David Kim for Congress. Can't argue with good taste. If any of you haven't checked out either of these two candidates, you absolutely should. They deserve our support and would be very strong allies for Yang's entire campaign in Congress. Grats to Heidi and David, you deserve it. David Kim just joined Will Lexham and Matt on Matt's new podcast to discuss this. Matt's interview with Paget Kagi is also available now. Check those out below. Kareem Zidane published an article on Bloody Elbow on a seldom discussed and unique policy of Yang's, workers' rights for MMA fighters. The article covers Yang's plan to work with Congress to extend the Muhammad Ali Boxing Act to MMA organizations, have the National Labor Relations Board treat MMA fighters as employees rather than independent contractors, and help them organize into an association or union. It includes this quote from Yang, which lays out the issue. Quote, "I'm a numbers guy. In every other sport, athletes are receiving anywhere between 47 to 50% of the sport's revenue. In the UFC, the estimates are that fighters are receiving anywhere between 10 to 15%. And that's not surprising when you look at the payouts for fighters, or even if you look at a major PPV card, those fighters are getting paid $25,000, $30,000, or $35,000 to fight, and these are fighters who are at the top of the industry. Meanwhile, these fighters generally only fight a couple times a year and have to pay coaches and many of the expenses. The UFC is able to maintain its stranglehold on fighters because of its union-busting tactics that ensure fighters who attempt to organize labor movements will be fired or retaliated against." End quote. The article also featured the story of Leslie Smith, a UFC fighter who was wrongfully fired for attempting to unionize. Trump, who is close friends with the CEO of UFC, pulled strings to have her case thrown out when she took them to court over it, despite all the evidence being clearly on her side. Yang intervened to help her, and Leslie has been an ardent supporter of his candidacy, even introducing him at one of his rallies. Speaking of scams, we hear a lot about welfare fraud from Republicans claiming that recipients are always looking to get funds that they shouldn't. But if you needed another reason to prefer UBI to welfare, the Washington Post recently reported on fraud at the other end. An audit found that Mississippi's Department of Human Services oversaw more than $94 million given to two nonprofits that spent it suspiciously. Favre Enterprises received payments totaling $1.1 million for speeches from the Mississippi Community Education Center paid by funds for TANF. As if that isn't bad enough, auditors determined that Favre didn't even attend those events. In addition, the audit found that MCEC spent $1.3 million for 3 12-week fitness boot camps conducted by a group called Victory Sports Foundation. Paul Lacoste, who runs Victory, said he didn't even know that he was receiving welfare money. Also receiving funds were former pro wrestler Ted DiBiase and his sons Ted Jr. and Brett for work that the audit says was never done and for unreasonable travel costs. Another nonprofit, the Family Resource Center of North Mississippi, also made many questionable or allegedly inappropriate expenditures using welfare cash. All this comes just months after a former DHS director and 5 others were indicted on state charges of embezzling about $4 million in TANF funds. State Auditor Shad White said, "If there was a way to misspend money, it seems DHS leadership or their grantees thought of it and tried it. With only a small portion of the qualifying poor receiving TANF, I guess this is where the excess funds go." Since Republicans took over both houses of legislation in Mississippi, only 165 out of roughly 12,000 TANF recipients received it, less than 1.4%. Sure seems like there would be a great deal less waste and fraud and a lot more people in need getting help if we just gave money to citizens directly. Evelyn Yang produced another op-ed to call for the New York State Legislature to not let the coronavirus interfere with the passage of the Adult Survivors Act, which, as we discussed before, would allow otherwise time-barred adult survivors of sex abuse of any age at least 1 year to file a civil claim. James Treacle tweeted out a funny quote from Rutger Bregman that I just have to share. Quote, "If you were the GDP index, your ideal citizen would be a compulsive gambler with cancer who's going through a drawn-out divorce that he copes with by popping fistfuls of Prozac and going berserk on Black Friday. End quote. Too true. American scorecard, anyone? Finally, I want to give a shout out to Shane Moynihan, who I saw answering the call to convince Lindsey Graham that UBI is pro work. Thank you for putting in the work for a better future, Shane, and for being a listener. The work I do here only has meaning if it helps people like you get the work done out there. And that'll do it for today's Yang Daily. Help trend direct cash relief, sign and share the White House petition and the new letter to Congress. Check out David and Heidi if you haven't. Visit bailoutthepeople.com to take action. Call the Congressional Switchboard to send the most effective message you can to your representatives. Ship a letter to both Congress and the Ways and Means Committee. Help recruit burners and others to the cause and get everyone to sign the petition to join the UBI movement. Flood all of Congress and the White House with calls, tweets, and letters, but particularly 5 calls a day, using ResistBot or Income Movement for easy contact. Print and hand out your neighborhood outreach cards. Consult Humanity Forward, the Income Movement Aid Database, United Way, or the H3 podcast thread if you need help. Consider what we can do to push the movement forward in this critical moment and discuss with others at the local hubs and the support links. And don't forget to Yang Daily.